For decades, we've basically been told that the hole in the ozone layer is a closed case.
Right, it's like the ultimate environmental success story.
Exactly. I mean,
Look,
we found this massive planetary crisis in the 1980s. The world actually got its act together. We banned the bad chemicals, and the Earth started healing.
it's a great narrative. We love a clean resolution.
We totally do. But it turns out we left a massive loophole, and right now, global industry is quietly leaking millions of tons of chemicals straight through it.
Yeah, it's a pretty startling reality check.
It really is. So today for our deep dive, we're looking at a fascinating April 2026 article from Science Daily. And this covers some highly revealing new research out of MIT that was recently published in Nature Communications.
Which basically shows that our greatest environmental triumph has a pretty serious bug in its system.
Right. So our mission today is to figure this out. Okay,
Yeah.
let's unpack this. We need to understand this hidden chemical loophole, look at the math behind the mistake and figure out how global policy can actually course correct.
I think that's the perfect approach. We have this tendency to view historical victories as, completely settled history.
Oh, absolutely. Like we checked the box, we moved on.
Right. But atmospheric chemistry doesn't care about treaties we signed 40 years ago. It only cares about what's physically in the air right now.
Which makes total sense.
And what researchers are detecting in the air today completely upends the timeline for when the ozone layer is actually going to be fully restored.
Okay, so before we get to the leak itself and the math, let's ground ourselves in the baseline. Because to understand how we got it wrong, we have to understand what we agreed to in the first place.
Right.
Right.
Let's go back to 1985. That's the year scientists discovered this terrifyingly large hole in the ozone layer over Antarctica.
Which was a huge deal because the ozone layer is basically the Earth's sunscreen, right?
Exactly. It filters out all that dangerous ultraviolet radiation. I mean, without it, surface life on this planet becomes virtually impossible.
I remember reading about how fast the panic set in back then. And rightfully so. I mean, it wasn't some abstract projection about the distant future.
No, it was a real-time collapse of the atmosphere, and the scientific community mobilized at just unprecedented speed.
It led to some pretty major breakthroughs really quickly.
It did. By 1986, a researcher named Susan Solomon and her team went to Antarctica and definitively proved what was destroying the ozone.
And it was chlorofluorocarbons, right? CFCs.
Yep, CFCs.
Which at the time, I mean, they were everywhere. You couldn't buy a refrigerator or an air conditioner or even like a can of hairspray without these chemicals.
No, they were totally foundational to modern consumer life. But the data was so irrefutable that it led directly to the 1987 Montreal Protocol.
The famous treaty.
Right. 197 countries and the European Union all agreed to aggressively phase out CFCs. And production basically halted.
Okay, and I'm guessing this is where the seed of our current problem gets planted. The treaty wasn't a 100% total ban, was it?
No, it wasn't. They wrote in this exception for something called feedstocks.
Okay, I know what a feedstock is in agriculture, but what does that mean in industrial chemistry? Because Susan Solomon is quoted in this MIT research calling this exact exception a bug in the system.
So, in chemical manufacturing, a feedstock is basically just a raw material. The Montreal Protocol banned CFCs where the chemical was the end product.
Like aerosol spray.
Exactly. Something designed to be sprayed directly into the open air, but it allowed companies to keep producing these ozone-depleting substances as long as they were only using them as raw ingredients to synthesize entirely different materials.
Give me a tangible example here. What are we making with these banned chemicals today?
We use them to manufacture plastics, non-stick coatings like Teflon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and ironically, we even use them to create the new, supposedly safer replacement chemicals that took the place of CFCs in our air conditioners today.
Wait, let me see if I have this straight. It's like a city banning the burning of coal because of all the smoke, right?
Sure.
But they leave this massive loophole where you can still mine and transport millions of tons of coal as long as your ultimate goal is to crush it up and turn it into diamonds.
That is actually a highly accurate way to look at it.
Because the assumption is that since the final product, the diamond, isn't smoke, the environment is perfectly safe. The baking ingredients magically don't count towards your calories.
What's fascinating here is that the authors of the Montreal Protocol assumed the industrial process was a perfectly closed loop.
They just assumed nothing would leak.
Well, they were given very firm assurances by the chemical industry in 1987 that practically none of these feedstock chemicals would ever escape into the sky during the manufacturing process.
I mean, how firm of an assurance are we talking about?
The official assumption baked into the global models was a leakage rate of just 0.5%.
Just 0.5%.
Right. They assumed 99.5% of the chemicals would be perfectly transformed into plastics and coatings.
Okay, I have to push back on that
Yeah.
because that sounds incredibly naive, even for the 1980s.
It does sound naive in hindsight, yeah.
Why would global policymakers just take the industry's word that chemical plants wouldn't leak? Like, of course they're going to leak.
Well, it wasn't just blind trust. There was actually a very specific economic logic underpinning it.
Which was what?
Luke Western, who is one of the researchers on this new study, points out that the prevailing belief was that companies wouldn't leak feedstocks because doing so would literally mean leaking their profits.
Okay, wait. I understand the theory of capitalism there. If a company spends millions buying raw chemical gases, letting that float away is like setting money on fire.
Exactly. Nobody does that on purpose.
Right, it's like leaving your car running while pumping gas, just burning money. So if they have this massive financial incentive to keep every molecule contained, how do we know they're failing? Are they self-reporting these leaks?
No, they definitely aren't. And that is where the technology catches up with the treaty. We aren't relying on corporate spreadsheets anymore.
So how are we tracking it?
We know they're leaking because of a system called A-gauge. That stands for the Advanced Global Atmospheric Gases Experiment.
Okay, age.
Right. It's this worldwide network of highly sophisticated monitoring stations.
But how does a monitoring station actually measure a leak from some random chemical plant on the other side of the world? It's not like they can just look up and see a plume of smoke.
No, it is entirely invisible, which is why the technology is so remarkable. These age stations are placed in incredibly remote areas.
Like where?
High mountain peaks, isolated coastlines, places far away from immediate pollution, and they continuously pull in air and run it through gas chromatographs and mass spectrometers.
Okay, that sounds highly technical. What does that actually do?
Basically, these instruments can separate the air into its base components and identify the unique chemical signatures of these specific feedstock gases. And they can do it in parts per trillion.
Parts per trillion. That is, I mean, that's like finding a single specific grain of sand in an Olympic swimming pool.
Exactly. It's hyper precise. So when age sensors around the world started sniffing the air, they didn't find that 0.5% leakage rate the industry promised.
Oh boy. What did they find?
They found a baseline leakage of 3.6%, and some specific chemical pathways were showing even higher rates of loss.
Wow. But hold on, we go back to that economic logic. If losing 3.6% of your raw material is losing money, why is it happening?
This raises an important question, doesn't it?
Yeah. You'd think these chemical giants would have airtight systems. What is physically going wrong at these plants?
Well, we have to step away from the idea of like a pristine laboratory and look at the physical reality of mass global manufacturing.
Because it's messy.
Very messy. We're talking about the explosive, unprecedented global demand for plastics over the last 30 years.
Right. Plastic is everywhere now.
To meet that demand, you have these massive industrial complexes with miles of pressurized steel pipes, thousands of industrial valves, and immense heat exchangers.
So it's just the sheer physical friction of the process.
Yes, exactly. Industrial processes are rarely perfectly sealed. Valves experience microscopic wear and tear. When temperatures fluctuate, systems actually have to be intentionally vented to prevent pressure explosions.
Oh, so sometimes they're leaking on purpose just for safety.
Right. I mean, a chemical plant might operate at 96.4% efficiency, which an engineer might consider a huge success at that scale.
Sure, an A grade on a test.
But when you are pushing millions of tons of volatile gases through those pipes every single year, that 3.6% margin of error aggregates into a colossal absolute volume of chemicals venting directly into the upper atmosphere.
Man, so the scale is what makes the percentage dangerous. Okay, so the global sensors got a 3.6% leak.
Right.
On paper, the difference between 0.5% and 3.6% might sound trivial to someone just glancing at it.
That sounds small, yeah.
But let's look at the models MIT built. How much physical damage to the atmosphere does that 3% gap actually cause?
Well, the MIT researchers, and they worked with partners from NASA and NOAA on this, they didn't just look at a snapshot of today.
Okay, what did they do?
They fed a full decade of production data from 2014 to 2024 into these complex atmospheric models to basically simulate the future all the way through the year 2100.
Wow.
And if the world had actually maintained that baseline assumption of a 0.5% leakage rate, The models show the ozone layer would fully recover to its healthy pre-1980 state by the year 2066.
2066. Okay, and what happens when you plug in the real AG's data, the 3.6%?
The recovery date is pushed back to 2073.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a 7-year delay caused entirely by this industrial feedstock loophole.
That is significant.
And it gets worse. The models reveal that if the plastics industry keeps expanding and leaking at this rate, total global emissions of ozone-depleting substances will plateau around 2045.
Wait, plateau? Like they just start falling entirely?
Exactly, they just stop falling. By 2100, total emissions will only have dropped by 50%.
So the momentum of the Montreal Protocol essentially hits a brick wall.
Precisely. The background noise of all those old 1980s refrigerators and spray cans is gone, but the new industrial machine just replaces it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to play the cynic here for a moment because, you might be listening to this and thinking this exact thing.
Okay, play devil's advocate. Let's hear it.
We're talking about planetary atmospheric repair. In the grand geological timeline of Earth, a delay from 2066 to 2073 is nothing. It is a blink of an eye.
Right, it seems tiny.
Yeah, I mean, the ozone layer is still going to heal eventually. Aren't we just splitting hairs if it's still recovering? Why does a 7-year slip really matter?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it matters immensely because we don't live in geological time, we live in biological time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Stefan Reimann, who is the first author of the study from the Swiss Federal Laboratories for Materials Science and Technology, he is very quick to ground this math in human reality.
Explain the biological mechanism there. What does a 7-year delay actually mean on the ground for you and me?
Well, remember that the ozone layer's primary job is to absorb UVB radiation.
Right.
When the ozone layer is thin, more UVB photons reach the surface of the Earth. And when those photons hit human skin, they possess enough energy to physically damage the DNA inside your skin cells.
And that causes cancer.
Exactly. That DNA damage is the primary catalyst for melanoma and other skin cancers.
So it's a direct one-to-one relationship. Less ozone equals more DNA damage.
Precisely. So 7 extra years of a delayed recovery means 7 extra years where the entire global population is exposed to a higher, more dangerous baseline of ultraviolet radiation.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Reimann notes that if you extrapolate that extra exposure across billions of people, you are looking at a statistically massive number of entirely avoidable skin cancer cases worldwide.
Well, that immediately strips away the abstract nature of the timeline, doesn't it?
It really does. It becomes very real.
It's not just some environmental milestone moving to the right on a chart. It translates directly to hospital beds and human lives.
Exactly.
It's this window of time where people will be harmed by something we actually have the power to stop. Which, I guess, naturally brings us to the response.
Right, the path forward.
Yeah, I mean, we found the leak, we know the cost. Are we permanently locked into this 2073 timeline? Or does the chemical industry actually have a mechanism to fix this?
Well, the research team is surprisingly optimistic.
Really?
Yeah, they really are. They don't view this as some irreversible climate doom scenario. They view it as a highly solvable engineering and policy problem.
Okay, that's refreshing. Why are they so optimistic?
Susan Solomon points out a fundamental characteristic of the chemical industry. Their entire business model is based on innovation. I mean, they invent new chemical pathways for a living.
I suppose that's true. They aren't heavily invested in the ozone-depleting chemical itself. They are just invested in the plastic it creates.
Exactly. There are thousands of alternative chemicals available to swap in that do not harm the ozone layer.
Oh, wow. So the solutions already exist.
For the most part, yeah. If a manufacturer is using a CFC feedstock to create a nonstick coating today, they have the chemical engineering capability to swap that out for a benign alternative tomorrow. They just need the regulatory push to actually do it.
That is a massive distinction. I mean, it's completely different from the fossil fuel debate.
How so?
Well, if you ask an oil company to stop selling oil, you are asking them to destroy their own core business.
Right, right.
But here, you're essentially just asking a restaurant chef to swap out one type of cooking oil for another. The final product, the plastic or the Teflon, stays exactly the same.
Yes, the economic friction to change is just so much lower. And it isn't always about inventing a brand new chemical either.
What do you mean?
Well, Luke Wester notes that a significant portion of this 3.6% leakage rate is genuinely just honest mistakes, like poor facility management.
Really? Just sloppy management.
Yeah. He points out that simply showing these massive chemical companies the A-gauge data, proving to them that they're bleeding valuable raw materials into the atmosphere, is often enough to trigger an internal audit. They tighten up their processes on their own.
Oh, that makes total sense. It's like installing a smart meter on a house and suddenly realizing you have a massive draft in the attic. Once someone shines a flashlight on the data, you go seal the window.
Precisely. Transparency alone forces efficiency.
So what does this all mean for global policy? Because if the companies won't do it voluntarily, what then?
The good news is the global framework is already prepared to handle this. The Montreal Protocol isn't a static document. It's an active, living treaty.
They still meet.
Yep, the member countries meet annually. And the researchers note that feedstock emissions are already being placed on the table for discussion at future meetings.
That is great news.
It is. They have the authority to legally mandate lower emission thresholds, demand better physical sealing at plants, or even ban specific feedstock pathways entirely.
You know, this might be the most optimistic environmental deep dive we've ever done.
I think you might be right.
Because the very fact that we're even talking about a 3.6% feedstock leak proves that the system we built in 1987 actually worked.
Yes, exactly.
The background pollution of all those old aerosols and air conditioners has dropped so low that we can finally detect this one, specific industrial leak.
It is a huge testament to the fact that international cooperation can yield quantifiable planetary scale results. I mean, the global sensors did exactly what they were designed to do.
So we don't have to tear down the house or rewrite the Montreal Protocol from scratch. We just need to give it a software update to patch the bud.
Exactly.
We have the technology to pinpoint the exact factories that are venting these gases, and the industry has the chemical alternatives to swap them out. If we shine a spotlight on this right now, we can close that 7-year gap, restore the ozone layer by 2066, and prevent a massive wave of global UV exposure.
And as we close out this analysis, I really want to pivot back to those age monitoring stations for a second.
Yeah, please do.
We relied on industry assurances in the 1980s because we simply didn't have the technology to verify their claims. But today, we have this global network of mass spectrometers sniffing the atmosphere in parts per trillion, acting as this hypersensitive check engine light for the planet.
Which is incredible.
It is. But it leaves you with a thought to mull over. What other historic, supposedly solved environmental treaties were based on self-reported corporate math?
Oh, man.
Right. As our planetary tracking technology becomes exponentially better, how many other hidden mathematical loopholes are just waiting to be discovered by a modern network of sensors?
That is a brilliant and honestly deeply unsettling question to end on. It proves that science is never truly settled. It's just an endless process of auditing our own assumptions. Well, thank you for taking this journey with us. Keep questioning the data, stay relentlessly curious, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.